This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayechi, and we are Be'ezus Hashem holding at the fourth and final share of Parshas Vayechi, Perek Nun Pasuk Tesvav. So Yosef and his brothers and the entire entourage of Cheshuvei Mitzrayim that had gone to Canaan to partake in the royal funeral of Yaakov Avinu had returned. And really now, for the first time, Yosef is going to be living alongside his brothers with the Tata, Yaakov Avinu, no longer alive. Says the Pasuk, Vayiru ache Yosef ki meis aviem. The brothers of Yosef saw that their father had died. Vayoimru, and they said to themselves, Lu yistamenu Yosef. It's very possible, I don't know, but what happens if Yosef decides to hate on us now? V'hashev yashev lanu eis kol hara asher gamalnu oisai. And he's going to decide to even the score and to take revenge for all the bad things that we had done to him. We made a big deal about this in the beginning of Parshas Vayigash, the reaction of Yosef HaTzadik to the brothers when they all realize who's who and what's what. The incredible gvura, the incredible midas tovus. How despite the fact the brothers did to Yosef what they did, but Yosef acted like the tzaddik yisod olam that he was in terms of the way he responded. But the brothers were a little bit concerned that maybe the only reason Yosef had reacted that way was because of the fact that Yaakov was alive. But now that Yaakov is not alive anymore, so maybe Yosef is going to suddenly interact with us differently. Maybe he was waiting for this moment, and all of a sudden, things are going to start going awry. In fact, Rashi says that there was one thing that Yosef started doing a little bit differently once Yaakov Avinu had passed away that he hadn't done previously. When Yaakov was alive, the brothers would often sit at the table of Yosef. Yosef is king, so that's quite the table, quite the banquet. But Mishemes Yaakov like Kirvan. As soon as Yaakov Avinu passed away, that custom stopped. And they attributed it, maybe this is some raglayim ludavar, some credibility to our paranoia, to this that we're a little bit concerned about. Either way. So the brothers decided that they're going to preempt this. Vayitzavu el Yosef lemer. So they sent the following message to Yosef. They said, Avicha tziva lefnei Moshe lemer. You should know that before your father died, this is what he said. Yosef. Give over the following message to Yosef. And this is not just a message, this reads like a tefillah. Ana, sana, pesha achecha v'chatasem, ki iragim alucha. Please forgive the terrible deeds that your brothers did to you. Do not take revenge. Now, being that this was something that the Tata said before he died, so we're requesting, Taka, you should fulfill this. Can you please forgive us? And when Yosef heard what the brother said, he began to cry. By the way, underrated. One of the themes of Yosef HaTzadik is how emotional he seems to be, how often he cries. But Vayechi Yosef b'dabra me'elav, when the brothers said what they said to Yosef, so Yosef began to cry. Now, there's a very important Rashi. Rashi says that this spiel of the brothers, Avicha tziva lefnei Moshe lemar, ana sana pesha achecha v'chatasan ki rag malucha, never happened. This wasn't true. Never happened. It was fake news. Why did they say it? They said it because they were scared. But really, it never happened. How could you tell a lie? This is one of the marmakoimis that you're allowed to be mishanim b'pnei hashalom. Right? Sometimes you're allowed to deviate from the truth. We have a Rabbi from the Sefer Shilos Shechuvas Torah Lishma, Rabbi Cheskel Kuchli, the Ben Ish Chai, right? Big Mevucha, exactly who he was. But the Rabbi was on a simon where he brings all the different Mekairos from Chazal, different times where a person's allowed to lie. But this is the most notable one. Mipnei Hashalom is a time that a person's allowed to lie, and as a result, it was because of that, they felt they had a license to do this. Now, truth is, this is still a little bit of a chiddush. Because usually when you think of the idea of being Meshane ha'emes b'pnei hashalom, those are the words of Chazal, it means maybe you tell a white lie. But to go ahead and say a schwarze lie, that's already something that you would think not okay, even mipnei hashalom. But either way, they made up this story because they were trying to make sure there was going to be shalom. And of course, Yosef reacted the way Yosef always reacts, like a tzaddik. First things, he began to cry. When they saw Yosef's reaction, so they went, vayiplu lefanav, and they fell in front of him. Vayomer, they said, hinenu l'cha la'avadim. We're willing to be slaves for you. Vayomer aleim, Yosef, al tiro, what are you doing? Why are you afraid you're going to be my slave? Ki atachas elikim ani? What do I look like? I'm tachas elikim. Who was the first ones to utter those words? Hatachas alikimani. Yaakov, and who did he say it to? Said it to Rachel. He said it to Yosef's mother. Over here, Yosef is saying those words. He's saying it to his brothers, and he continued. He said, "Va'atem chashaftem olai ra." Right? You tried doing bad to me in your mind. You thought you were going to kill me. You were going to sell me as a slave. But alikim chashav alatayva. But ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had the right thing in mind for me. He had something good. And the reason was for me to end up being here. So what's Parshas? What's Yosef HaTzadik telling the brothers? He's telling the brothers that why would I even take revenge anyways? Oh, because you had a havamina, you had a machshava ra, because atem chashavtem alai ra. At the end of the day, like kim chashava l'toiva, look at all the good that came from it. So there's no basis for me to even take revenge from you. Which, by the way, this is Yosef l'shitase. This is exactly what Yosef told the brothers the first time when he said ani Yosef, and they were all scared. Right? They couldn't even say one word. He said this exact response, and this is Yosef l'shitase. He's saying the same thing. If you look at Rashi adds one knech. Rashi says that what Yosef was also telling the brothers is you think that I'm going to try to harm you? Let's be honest. If there's anyone that knows that you could try to harm someone from today till tomorrow, but if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want the person to be harmed, he's not going to be harmed, it's us, right? Because atem chashaftem alai ra, yet elikim chashav alatayva. So we know that it doesn't even make sense for me to think to try to harm you. If you deserve punishment, the Abish is going to deal with it, but I'm certainly not going to get involved. Either way, va'ata al tiro. Yosef said again, now you have nothing to fear. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to support your children. He gave them the chama, and he spoke divrei kfushin, right? He made them feel much better. Yosef settled in Mitzrayim together with Beis Aviv, right? His father's family. And Yosef lived 110 years. The pasuk says that Yosef was zoicha to see from Ephraim b'nei shileshim. So what does that mean? It means his grandchildren had children, right? So Shileshim would be the third dar. B'nei Shileshim means the children of the third dar. Gam b'nei Macher ben Menashe yuldu al birkei Yosef. Yosef's son Menashe had a famous son Macher, and the b'nei Macher also had children. So he's seeing multiple generations come from him. Yosef then turned to his brothers. He said, Anoichi meis, I'm going to die. But one day HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to remember you. And he is going to take you up from this land. To the land that he had promised, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And then Yosef did to his brothers exactly what his father had done to him. He made his brothers swear, and he said, one day HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to remember you. He's going to take you from here, and when you ascend, I want you to take my atzamois, I want you to take me with you. Vayamos, Yosef says the pasuk. And after that, Yosef HaTzadik closed his eyes. And Yosef HaTzadik died. He was 110 years old. And the Mitzrim, the Egyptians, did this process of chanata, like they had done to Yaakov, Vayisem ba'aroin, and they placed him in an aroin. This is the famous aroin shel Yosef, b'Mitzrayim, and they left him in the interim in Mitzrayim. And with those words, a little bit of raid, but with those words we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. We'll get back to the Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. But just one ha'ara before we walk away from Sefer Bereshis, Kosha Alai Pridaschem, and we pivot into the second phase of really Brias HaOlam, and that is Sefer Shemois. If you take a look at the Ramban at the very, very end of his Pirush, this is not the last Ramban, but it's the postscript. It's a little bit of a poem that the Ramban wrote after the last Ramban. He says as follows. He says, V'nishlam Sefer Bereshis. Sefer Bereshis was just concluded Besipur Divrei Avos, by telling the story of the Avos. Lahagid Rishonos Vachadashos. And what's the oimik of the Sipur HaAvos? It's to tell the Rishonos and the Chadashos, B'terem titzmachno ba'levavos. The idea of learning the Sipur Avos is knowing the future before the future is even going to happen. It's lahagid rishonos v'chadashos, to be able to foretell what's going to take place b'terem titzmachna, before it actually happens. This is the Ramban l'shitasai. This is an idea that the Ramban says countless times throughout his Pirush on Sefer Bereshis, and that is the reason the Torah was so meirich with all the stories of the Avos. It's because Ma'isa Avos similar bottom. The first time the Ramban said it was in Parshas Lach Lecha. He said, "Oimer lecha klal." I'm going to tell you a principle. Tovin oisai b'chol ha'parshiyos habois b'inyan Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. For who inyan gadol hiskiru Rabbi Seinu b'derech tzara va'amru, and they said, "Kol masha ira la'avos similar bottom." V'lochein yarichu haksuvim b'sipur ha'masois v'chapfiras ha'be'erois u'shara mikshim v'shyachshe v'achoyshe behem kilu heim dvarim miyutarim ein bohem tayeles. It's not true. V'kulam bohem lelamid al ha'asid. So the Ramban, who said that the whole story of the Avos is to tell us the future before it even happens, v'nishlam sefer bereshis b'sipur divrei ha'avos lahagid rishonos v'chadashos b'terem titzmachno ba'levavos. And then he says, "Uliyoytzer kol reishis roichav aravos, tehilos rabbos, v'hoidois l'revavos, v'loy niskenu alilos v'sibois, megala amukos, v'deos niskavois, u'moitzi la'ara machshavos, ha'moilech oisi b'derech tzedakah b'toich nesivois, ha'goyim l'chayavim toivos." What a beautiful poem that the Ramban concludes his Pirush on Sefer Bereshis with. But the Ramban says, you want to understand what Sefer Bereshis is? It's Sipur Divrei Avos. And you want to know why it's important to know Sipur Divrei Avos? It's Lahagid Rishonos V'chadashos B'terem Titzmachnu B'alavavos. These are not stories. These are little hints and remuzim into understanding Klal Yisrael, into understanding the future of Klal Yisrael. But I had a ha'ara, and this ha'ara is very, very subtle, but it bothers me a lot. And that is, if we go back and we do a little bit of a sikum of Sefer Bereshis, so the story of the Avos begins in the end of Parshas Noach, right? That's where it begins. Obviously, Bereshis bar Elokim Eis Hashmayim Ve'Eis Haaretz, and then you have the Dara Mabel, the Dara Flog, and then at the end of Parshas Noach, we're introduced to Avram Avinu. And the story of Avram Avinu starts from the end of Noach. It's Lech Lecha, Vayera, Chayesara. In Vayera Chayesara, we overlap together with Yitzchak, and that goes into Toldos, in the beginning of Toldos. Yaakov is born, and Yaakov is, of course, the primary subject of Parshas Vayechi and Vayishlach, and into the final Parshas as well. Stating that, who is the main character, so to speak, of Parshas Vayeshev? My vote? It's not Yaakov, it's Yosef. For sure it's Yosef. The parsha begins with Yosef's dreams, and then Yosef is almost killed, but ultimately he's sold. And then we have the story of Eshes Potifar, and we have the story of the Sarah Mashkim and the Sarah Oifim when Yosef HaTzadik is in Beis HaSayar. Now, of course, who sold Yosef? The brother sold Yosef. And who was Bitzar over it? It was Yaakov. Yaakov was the one who sent Yosef to Shechem. We also interrupt the program with the story of Yehuda and Tamar. But the main character of Parshas Vayeshev, I don't think it's a question. It's Yosef HaTzadik. Who's the main character of Parshas Miketz? For sure it's Yosef HaTzadik. What's even the question? Yaakov plays a role. We'll send Binyamin, won't send Binyamin. But ultimately, who's the main subject of the parsha? It's Yosef HaTzadik. The same is true, for sure, for the first half of Parshas Vayigash, really even the end of Parshas Vayigash. Even Parshas Vayechi, it's the story of Yaakov, it's the story of Yosef. How does the parsha end? What are the last words of Sefer Bereshis? Vayamos Yosef, b'mei v'eseh shonim, vayachantu oisam, vayisem ba'arim b'mitzrayim. The Ramban says that Sefer Bereshis is Sipur ha'avos. It's supposed to be the story of the Avos. Obviously, it's not going to be exclusively the story of the Avos, but it's the story of the Avos. I don't know, it feels like there's too much Yosef at the end. Yosef is for sure the theme of the end of Sefer Bereshis. Yosef's not one of the Avos. He's one of the Shvatim. So how's it possible then, if Bereshis is Sipur Avos, that there's so much print, so much Torah Shebiksav related to the story of Yosef? Just to bring out the question a little bit better, if we go back down memory lane and we chazer a little bit, it's incredible to me how little the Torah talks about the Shvatim. We know so little. Now, the Shvatim Bechlal, we know maybe a little bit more. But think of the individual Shvatim. Let's start from the beginning. What do we know about Ruvain? So Ruvain was a little boy. He found Dudam and he brought it to his mother, Leah. I mean, that's Ruvain. Okay, it's part of the story. We know the story of Bilhah. We know Ruvain was the one brother that very much didn't want Yosef to be killed. Ruvain told Yaakov, I'll take Achrayas over bringing back Binyamin as Shnei Banai Tamas, which Yaakov didn't even accept, right? We know very, 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 very little about Ruvain. What do we know about Shimon and Levi? Shimon v'Levi Achim, Klei Chamas Mechei Roisei. Right? That's pretty much what we know about Shimon. Shimon and Levi were involved in the story of Shechem. We know from Torah Shabbal Peh, Rashi brings many times, they were the Iker ones that were involved in the Mechiras Yosef. We know Shimon was taken as collateral, right? He was taken as a hostage until the Shvatim were able to bring Binyamin back. We know Shimon and Levi didn't get brachas, right? Reuven also didn't get a bracha, by the way. We know so little about Shimon and Levi. Yehuda, maybe we know a drop more about. So we know about the story of Yehuda and Tamar, right? Obviously. Vayigash of Yehuda. Yehuda was the one that said, Anoichi Arvenu. Yehuda was part of the advanced team. He went to Goshen, Lahirois Lafanov. Right? Yehuda gets a disproportionate amount of shout-outs. He seems to be a leader. That's why Ati Yoducha Achecha, right? He's the one that's ultimately going to be the king, like Yosef mi Yehuda. So again, we know a little bit about Yehuda. Yisachar, Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, even Binyamin. Binyamin, we know about him passively. They're going to bring Binyamin, they're not going to bring Binyamin. Yosef sees Binyamin, he cries on Binyamin. There's so little we know about Binyamin. But the last full Parshas is Yosef. There's something different about Yosef than there is about the other brothers. I think it's Pashit, and it's Einoi Omer Elo Darsheni. So I just want to share with you an incredible Maramakan. It's a Marsha. It's a Marsha Mesechtes Brachas Daf Nun Hey Yomid Beis. The Gemara says, "Hey man, the Ayel Amas. If somebody enters a city, v'dachol me'ein abisha, and he's worried about an ayin hara, so this is what he should do. Linkoitz kafa di yada di yamina biyada di smoila. He should take his right thumb and put it in his left hand. V'skafa di yada di smoila biyada di yamina, and he should take his left thumb and put it in his right hand. V'lei mahachi, and he should say the following: Ana ploini bar ploini mizara di Yosef kasina. I come from Yosef HaTzadik to lo shalta be'ein. And he's exempt from ayin hara. Shenema, the pasuk says, Ben Parshas Yosef, Ben Parshas Ale Oyin, Al Tikre Ale Oyin, Ela Oile Oyin. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Memehacha. There's a different makar that Yosef is somehow exempt from ayin hara because it says V'yidgu Laroi B'kerev Aretz. That was the bracha that Yaakov gave. Not Ephraim and Menashe. That was the bracha that he gave Yosef. And Mad Agim Shabiyah, Mayim Mechasan Aleim, Ve'ein Ayin Ra Shoyletes Behem. Avzare Shal Yosef, Ein Ayin Ra Shoyletes Behem. So if somebody's afraid of an Ayin Hara and he enters a city, put your right thumb in your left hand, your left thumb in your right hand, you should say, Ana Mizara de Yosef Kasina. Says the Marsha. What's the makar to saying such a nusach? Ana Mizara de Yosef Kasina. It comes from a Gemara that's mentioned a few times with the great Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan used to sit in the front of the Sharei Tefillah, and all the women that went to the mikveh would see him. He was very handsome. They said, "You're not worried about an ayin hara?" He said, "Ana mizara de Yosef kasina de lo shalta be'ein." When Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ana mizara de Yosef kasina," he said it because it was true. Because Rabbi Yochanan came from Shevet Yosef. He knew that. In fact, the Svar Makdoshim say that Arizal said he was Gilgal Nishmasai of Yosef HaTzadik. That's why he lost 10 sons, connected the 10 tipin of Zerah. But Anamizar de Yosef Kasino, as it relates to Rabbi Yochanan, is because it was real. But how can it be that any person that enters a city that's worried about Ayin Hara is going to say Anamizar de Yosef Kasino? That would be good if you were really Mizar de Yosef Kasino. But what if you're Mizar de God Kasino, whose bracha was not no ayin hara, his bracha was God gedud yegedenu v'hu okay, right? You're good, okay. That was his bracha. It was a whole different bracha. So how could he say, I know mizara de Yosef Kosin? So the Marsha says two terutzim to this kasha. The first teretz the Marsha says is v'yesh shloimer da halacha shukei. Could be this is an incantation. That's all it is. It's an incantation. The nusach of the incantation is, I know mizara de Yosef Kosin. You don't mean that you're literally Mizar de Yosef Kasina, but these are just the words that you're supposed to say that's going to make this concern of the Ayin Hara go away. For Oidei Shloimeh says the Marsha, the Chol Yisrael Nikra al Shem Yosef, that every single Yid is called Yosef. Every single yid on some level is Zara de Yosef. Dichsiv, like the pasuk says in Tehillim, Kapitel Pei, Noye Katsoin Yosef, and Ayin Rashi Shah. So what's Kapitel Pei, and what does Rashi say over there? So the pasuk says, Roye Yisrael Hazina, Noye Katsoin Yosef. So the Heilige Rashi. Noyeg Katzoin Yosef. Kol Yisrael Nikron al Shei Yosef. Every single yid is considered to be from Yosef. Lefisha hu pirnason v'chilkolam b'mei harav. It's because Yosef was mefarnes and he was mechalkel the Yidden when they were in a state of hunger. So because he took care of us and he sustained us, it's for that reason that we're Nikra al Shem Yosef. The truth is, this idea that Klal Yisrael is called al Shem Yosef, you find in other psukim as well. A few kapitals earlier in Tehillim, and this is Kapitel Ayin Zayin, Pasuk Tez Zayin. Ga'alta b'zroya amecha. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you redeemed your nation. Who's your nation? Bnei Yaakov v'Yosef Selah. They're the Bnei Yaakov and they're the Bnei Yosef. We're the Bnei Yaakov. How did we become the Bnei Yosef? The teretz is this marsha. Kol Yisrael Nikru al Shem Yosef. One more pasuk. And this is in the Nevuah of Avadia. Perek Aleph, it's only one perek. Pasuk Yud Ches. V'hoyo beis Yaakov eish, ubeis Yosef lahava, ubeis Esav lakash. Now we know Chazal say beis Yosef over there means Yosef, and it means the Shevet of Yosef. But in the Pshutai Shal Mikra, it's Klal Yisrael being referred to as beis Yaakov, and it's Klal Yisrael being referred to as beis Yosef. We're Beis Yaakov. How did we become Beis Yosef? The teretz is an idea of Kol Yisrael Nikra al Shem Yosef, and that's why every single yid says the Marsha can recite this nusach of Anami Zara de Yosef Kasina. The truth is that if you take a look at the Even Ezra on the pasuk Hamalach Hagoyel Oisi Mikol Ra, Yivarich es hana'arim v'yikarei vahem shemi. What does it mean v'yikarei vahem shemi? Says the Even Ezra, v'yikarei vahem shemi ki hine kol Yisrael yikru Ephraim. Every single yid is called Ephraim. Gam Yosef. Every single yid is called Yosef. Every single yid will have a connection to you, Yosef. Said Yaakov Avinu. V'yikarei bahem shemi meant haben Yaakov li Ephraim. What it meant was that even though you're one of my sons, but despite the fact that you're only one of my sons, you're going to be called al Shem Yosef. Klal Yisrael will be. They're going to view you a little bit differently. You're going to be someone that they're going to be Nikra al Shmai. And then the Even Ezra, in a half a sentence, asks a kasha that I think is one of the best kashas that have infrequently been publicly asked. I was going to say never, but infrequently. And that is, everyone knows, Rashi brings in Parshas Vayechi, that why was Rachel Imenu buried on the side of the road? Because Yaakov Avinu saw Baruch Kodshay. Then when it was Radan HaRosh is going to come, and a guy Ostrab and the Eden, and they're going to be in Golus, and they're going to pass by Kever Rachel, and they're going to daven to Rachel. And Rachel is Mevaka al Banel. She's going to cry, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to say, Kol Barama Nishma, Yesh right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to answer the prayers of Rachel. Who's Rachel crying for? Rachel Mevaka al Banel. Let me ask you a question. We're the sons of Rachel? We're the grandchildren of Rachel? Again, we're doing Chazar over here. Yaakov had 4 wives. Through his 4 wives, he had 12 sons. Only 2 of those 12 sons came from Rachel, which means 5/6 of Klal Yisrael are not B'nai Rachel. They're B'nai Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. What does it even mean, Rachel Mevaka al Baneh? It's a pella. Was meint this Rachel Mevaka al Baneh? You ever think of that? Rachel Mevaka al Baneh. That's good news for Ephraim and Menashe. It's good news for Binyamin. But what if you're a Levi? Right? What if you're a Kohen? What if you come from one of the other Shvatim? It doesn't help you very much, Rachel Mevaka al Baneh, because the Rachel's crying for her children. Where is the rest of Klal Yisrael included in the Rachel Mevaka al Baneh? Oh, but the teretz is pashit. Because if every single yid could say, Anam Mizara de Yosef Kasina, if we all come from Yosef HaTzadik, then by definition we all come from Rachel. Because Rachel is Yosef's mother. I'll tell you another fascinating thing. What did Yaakov tell Yosef? Ephraim and Menashe, Keruven v'Shimon Yiyoleh. Yosef HaTzadik, your 2 sons are going to be Shvatim. How could Yosef's sons be Shvatim? You would think that in order to be a Shevet, what you need is that your father should be an Av, right? An Av has a shevet, right? Avos, Mechaldik told us, there's an idea of an Av has a shevet. L'chayra, where does Yosef come that his sons Ephraim and Menashe are going to be shvatim? Keruven and Shimon. Don't you have to be an Av to be a shevet? The teretz is because Yosef HaTzadik wears two hats. On the one hand, Yosef HaTzadik is one of Yaakov's 12 sons. But on the other hand, Anam Mizar, the Yosef Kasina is true for every single Yid. Because just like every single Yid comes from Avram, and every single Yid comes from Yitzchak, and every single Yid comes from Yaakov, on some level that's above our pay grade, every single Yid comes from Yosef as well. We're all Bnei Yosef, and if we're all Bnei Yosef, that means Yosef was an Av. If Yosef was an Av, Yosef's sons can now be Shvatim, and that's the oimik of this inyan of Ephraim and Menashe, Keruven and Shimon Yili. Yaakov Avinu, when he gave the Birchas Yaakov, so he went through all the sons, and everyone got a bracha. Until he came to Yosef. By Yosef, he was maflig with his bracha. What was the bracha that he gave Yosef? I think this is emes. He said, Birchas Avicha Gavru al Birchas Horai. He said, you should know the brachas that the Eibishter gave me, I'm your father, that's Birchas Avicha, is greater than the brachas that my Eltern got. The brachas that Yitzchak and Avram got. Ad Tavas Givas Oilam. Because they got brachas that had a gevul. My bracha was, mamish busy, the andere Ekwelt, ufaratz the yom of a keimot zafoin of an egma. I'm taking those brachas, says Yaakov, and tiena l'roich Yosef l'kotka nizerechet. I'm putting them on your plates. I'm giving them to you. Yaakov Avinu got brachas, and he took the brachas, and he gave the brachas to Yosef. Isn't this exactly what happened throughout Sefer Bereshis? Avram Avinu gets brachas, and then the Eibishter says, those brachas I gave you, it's going to go to Yitzchak. Ki bi Yitzchak yikar l'chazera. And then Yitzchak gets brachas, and the brachas, is it going to be Yaakov or is it going to be Yosef? No, the brachas are going to go to Yitzchak. It goes from Av to Av to Av. Yaakov Avinu had the brachas, and Yaakov Avinu didn't give them to all his sons. The reason he didn't give them to all his sons because his sons were only sons. They were anofim. They were just branches of Klal Yisrael. But Yosef is not just a branch. Yosef is a shoirish. Yosef is a tree himself. Yosef is one of the others. Every year is Anam Mizara de Yosef Kasina. Every year is called Beis Yosef. We're all considered from the family of Avram, the family of Yitzchak, the family of Yaakov, and the family of Yosef. So that's what Yaakov Avinu said. He said, Birchos Avicha Gavru al Birchos Horai Atavas Givas Oilam and Tiena l'Rosh Yosef l'Kotka Nezirechav. Not to get too crazy, but maybe this is where it was even Chal, and this bracha was where it was Neskayim this Inyan. That Yosef HaTzadik, you're not just going to be one of the brothers. You're a hemshech of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and it's Yosef. Yosef is not just the Bechir HaShvatim. Yosef is one of the others. He's on the spectrum of Av. Now, he's also one of the Shvatim. And Chanami, it's a little bit tricky. He's a little bit both. Yosef wears two hats, so to speak. But the idea is that Yosef HaTzadik is not just one of the Shvatim. Yosef HaTzadik is one of the others. Could be there's even a bigger neifach to this. And that is, we know that Yosef HaTzadik was the Bechar. Now, Reuven was originally the Bechar. But then, Yaakov took the Bechar and he transferred it over to Yosef. A person has to honor his father. A person has to honor his mother. Kabed esavicha v'esimecha vav is l'rabis achicha agadol. And all the Rishonim say that the inyan of achicha agadol, on some level, it's like a father, right? The oldest brother is a little bit like the father. That means Yosef was really the achicha agadol for all the shvatim. That means on some level, Yosef, just because of the fact that he's the bechar, is a shtickle enough. But the bottom line is, Yosef HaTzadik is, of course, Yosef HaTzadik. He's the tzaddik. But Yosef HaTzadik also wears another hat. Yosef HaTzadik was also one of the others. And that's why Anam Mizar de Yosef Kasina. And that's why you find throughout the Divrei Kabbalah this idea that Klal Yisrael is referred to as Beis Yaakov. We're also referred to as Beis Yosef. And that's why Rachel Mevakal Banel is true for every single Yid. Because if we all come from Yosef, then by definition that means we come from Rachel as well. And that's the oimik of Ephraim and Menashe, Keruven and Shimon Yil. Because to have sons that are shvatim means on some level you're enough. And Yosef HaTzadik on some level was enough. And that's why Yaakov Avinu said, those brachas that I got, which really come from Yitzchak, that come from Avram, those brachas tiena l'rosh Yosef l'kotka nizirechav. I'm taking those brachas and I'm giving those brachas to you. If Yosef HaTzadik in the Sfarim HaKadoshim on some level is like an Av, then it's very moving. Why in the Sipur of Maisa Avos Simon Labanim. In the Sipur of Maisa Avos Simon Labanim, we end with the story of Yosef HaTzadik. The last words of Sefer Bereshis is Vayamos Yosef. It's the fact that Yosef HaTzadik passed away. Because Yosef HaTzadik goes down as being not just our very famous, very righteous uncle. He goes down as being one of our Zedas. Every single Yid, says the Marsha could say, Anom mizara de Yosef kasina. So when it's Nishlam Sefer Bereishnis, Besipur Divrei Avos, Lahagad Rishonis v'Chadashis Beterem Titzmach Nebal Avos, it's the story of Yosef HaTzadik as well. It's a big nafkamina lahalacha, because that means Yosef's story is Ma'isa Avos Simon Labanim. That means the Gevura of Yosef, the Vayemoin Yaakov, the Vayemoin of Yosef. It means the fact that Yosef HaTzadik lived with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the darkest times, but was able to ascend and climb mamish until he rose to the top of the world. The fact that Yosef HaTzadik was able to overcome his physical nisyonis and his spiritual nisyonis. The fact that Yosef HaTzadik was able to raise a generation of Ephraim, Menashe, Keruvim, Shimon, Yuli in the Mem Tesh Shari Tumah Mitzrayim. These are not just stories that we get inspired from. These are stories that are our story. These are stories that are B'terem Titzmachna B'alavavos Lahagad Rishonis V'Chadash. It's the story of the Jewish people. The story of Avram is the story of Klal Yisrael. The story of Yitzchak and Yaakov are the story of Klal Yisrael. And the story of Yosef with all his Gvura and all his Chen and all his Atzlacha and all his Nisyonis, that too is our story. It's the story of the Yid. It doesn't matter what matzav he's in. It doesn't matter what Nisyonis the Eibishter throws on us. We cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we're going to be Matzliach. We can have the success B'chol Unyonim the same way Yosef HaTzadik did. The Sefer Bereishis Sipur Avos ends with the story of Yosef, because in the story of Yosef is also the story of Klal Yisrael. Either way, Baruch Hashem, we were Zoicha. We embarked upon this journey, not really knowing where it was going to lead us, and we have a schus today to say B'chabura, Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, and just to end with the words of the Ramban at the end of his beautiful poem, after he gives Tilos Rabbos and Hoidois L'Revavos, he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Megala Amukos V'deos Niskavos, U'moitzi L'Ara Machshavos, HaMoilech Oisi, B'derech Tzedakah, B'toich Nesivos, taking us in a derech tzedakah. This should be the derech tzedakah. We should be zoicha to be able to go weiter. Hagoyim l'chayavim toivos. And on that note, chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek.